Hey guys, I'm Ethan Moore from Stockholm Supply, and today I'm going to do kind of a fun video here. It's a video I've needed to do for a long time, but I haven't done it. It's how to properly set up your bandsaw and your bandsaw guide specifically. Now, properly is the key word here. You're going to see lots of different methods on YouTube on different ways to set up your bandsaw, but in my opinion, there's only one right way to do it. There's only one way that you can do it that will work with every blade, that will work with every cutting, or 99% of cutting techniques, whether you're cutting straight or curves, and every bandsaw. So that's what I'm going to show you here today. Now the first thing you're going to do when we're setting up this bandsaw, we're going to pretend we've never set up this bandsaw before. We're going to loosen the guides, the side guides, as well as the thrust bearings on the top and bottom, and back everything away from the blade, so that blade is totally free from any sort of obstructions here. So let's loosen these off here. Now I am using the Raycon 10-326. I want to preface this by saying this setup I'm showing you will work with bearing guides as well as steel blocks and cool blocks, and ceramic guides as well. It's all the same. So we'll back all these guides off on top and bottom. Okay. And we can get started. So that blade is totally free here. Now the first thing you're going to do when you're setting up the guides in your bandsaw is you're going to look at the top wheel here. Now if you look, I have this in a terrible position at the moment, but there's lots of different opinions here. Some guys will tell you to put the body of the blade in the middle. Some will tell you to put the teeth of the blade in the middle. The idea with the teeth of the blade in the center of the wheel, apparently that's supposed to support the teeth. Now that may support the teeth on the wheel, but there's about 27 inches between these two wheels that blade, those teeth will not have any support by the center of the wheel. So the right way to do this is always to put the body of the blade in the center here. Now that's really good because if you have a 3/4 or wider blade, if I were to have the teeth in the middle on a 3/4 blade, the back of the blade would be hanging right over the back of the wheel. So always have the body of the blade in the center, just like that, and lock that up. The next thing we're going to do is probably the most important setting on your guides, and it's the thing that if you don't set it up properly can damage your blade really quickly. So thrust bearings, that's next. Okay, so the first setup we're going to do on the guides is going to be the side guides position as well as the thrust bearing. This all happens at the same time. Now, this is a very important setup because especially if you have ceramic guides or bearings, if you don't have this set up right, you can nearly instantly damage your blade. Now, hopefully you guys can see this in the camera here, but you can see the side guide right here, and you can see how it's positioned according to that blade. Now make sure everything is locked in place here. What we want to do is we want to set that side guide right here so it's just behind the teeth of the blade, just behind the gullet of that blade. If we have this too far forward, what will happen is those guides will hit the teeth of that blade, they will flatten it, and they'll essentially wreck that blade. So we want to make sure we have these guides set just behind the gullet and lock that in place. Okay, now once you have that in place, the next important thing to do is the thrust bearing. If we have that thrust bearing set too far back, that blade can be pushed just like this, and say that's even 3/16 of an inch away from that blade, you can push that blade right back in and into your side guides, and again, that will essentially instantly wreck your blade. So what we want to do is we want to make sure this thrust bearing is just behind the blade, maybe the thickness of a piece of paper, but right like that. So you should be able to spin your wheel and the blade not spin that bearing, but there will be very little distance between that thrust bearing and the back of the blade. Now, the camera is going to be too difficult to see the bottom guide setup, but it is identical in every way to the top here. So what I'll do now is I'll quickly make those two same adjustments on the bottom that I just did on the top here. Okay, so the last setup that we have to do with the guides seems like the most important, but it's actually the least important. What we're going to do is set up the side guides. Now, just like that thrust bearing on the back, you're going to want to just set these side guides so they are just not touching, about a paper thickness away from that blade. If you have phenolic blocks or cool blocks, you can actually put that phenolic block right up against that blade. That's what they're designed to do. But for bearings or ceramic guides, you want them just a little bit away. Just like that. Lock that up. And again, if you spin your wheel, everything should be nice and close there, but none of the bearings should spin. So again, let me quickly set up the bottom right here, and we'll keep going. So now that we have everything set up, you should be able to spin this wheel at the top and hear essentially nothing. You might hear a little tiny bit of rubbing every now and then on one of the bearings. This right here, though, is what you don't want to hear. That is the wrong sound. This right here, that's the right sound. Okay? So this is the ideal setup if you want to cut straight on your bandsaw, if you want to resaw a piece of lumber, or this is off a log that we did with the little ripper, or if you want to cut curves or circles with a circle cutter for bowl blanks, or if you want to follow a line, like say you're making a duck decoy and you have a pattern and you want to follow that line, this is the ideal setup to do that. So 99% of bandsaw work, this is how you're going to set it up, whether it's a 1/4 inch blade or a 1 inch wide blade. That process is what you want. Now there is one way that we can set this bandsaw up differently for one specific task, and that is if you want to cut kind of a free form, freehand, no lines, and have that blade kind of make some nice natural curves. There is a way to do that. This method is not for following a line, but this will give you some nice natural sort of flowing curves that you can do. And I will quickly show you how to set it up to do that. So the first thing you'll do is you're going to completely get rid of the bottom guides on the bandsaw here. So no thrust bearing, no side guides. The very bottom should be totally free. On the top, what we want to do is we want to back the side guides up so they are about a 1/16 of an inch into the body of that blade. I don't know if you can see that there. Look from this direction here, Kate. So the majority of the blade is sticking out, but just the very back of that blade is supported by those side guides. And then we will bring the thrust bearing up. Whoops, I should tighten this a little better. Bring that thrust bearing up right behind the blade. So what this will allow you to do is that blade will go back into that thrust bearing, but it will be able to tilt and curve just like that. So that will make for some nice gentle flowing curves. This is not good for following a line because that blade will essentially cut wherever it naturally wants to cut. So good for certain applications, but again, 99% of the cutting you are going to do the previous setup I just showed you there. So yeah, if anybody else has any questions, you can email me at info@stockandsupply.com or just comment on the video. And if you want to see future videos, please subscribe.